Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, folks, there's a 14-team playoff that is gaining momentum. We're going to talk about that. And Pat McAfee over at ESPN says, I don't have an MF boss. And MF doesn't stand for Mary Franklin.
You don't need to hear things like that. You just a boy. You need to think about good thoughts while you still a boy.
This is on ESPN. It says sources say 14-team college football playoff has momentum. And I know y'all are thinking, we haven't even done the 12-team playoff. Well, that's only a 2-year deal, and you've got to get these things done very early on. So if you're going to go to a 14-team playoff, you better be doing it now. You can't do it in 2 years because that's impossible. There's just way too many things that have to be taken care of prior to that. And it says the future of college football contract after 2025 is uncertain. And it says the 1-month deadline of mid-March looms, so there's optimism and momentum for a 14-team playoff starting in 2026. There's an effort to come to an agreement in the coming weeks, but nothing is certain. Now, here's what the problem is. So let's go ahead and let's get blunt about it. The SEC and the Big Ten keeps adding teams, and they're getting bigger and more powerful. And they don't like the situation of the 12-team because they're being treated the same as the other two conferences, which would be the ACC and the Big 12. They don't want that. They want special accommodations, or they want a whole lot more money because they're the big dogs. And so what they're wanting to do is a 14-team playoff. That's where the top two teams, which would be the SEC champion and the Big Ten champion, get an automatic bid to the second week. So they'd get a bye. They're the big dogs. It's if you won the AFC and the NFC. And so they also want guaranteed spots. They want 3 guaranteed spots of the 14 that would go to the SEC. They want 3 for the Big Ten. The ACC would get 2. The Big 12 would get 2. Then you would get 1 for the group of 5, and then you'd have 3 at large. And that's this right here, as you can see, SEC, Big 10, ACC, Big 12, group of 5. And then they've got Notre Dame down here as 1 spot. That's if they're in the top 14. And Notre Dame has to be the precious pup. It's always kind of a pain. They won't join a conference because they're Notre Dame.
Well, whoop-de-doo. Get out.
But it does create issues. The way it's set up right now, the 4 top-rated champions of their conference, which, see, the problem was they were thinking Pac-12. That's why they went with the top-rated. But basically, the SEC, Big 10, ACC, and Big 12, they'll get the automatic bid based on the highest rating. So they'll move on to the second week these next 2 years. But they're trying to make it now to where only the top 2. So there's all kinds of issues with this. And a lot of this makes sense because the Big Ten, the SEC, they feel like they're kind of, they keep adding these teams and they're going to get creeped. And you're going to wind up with a bunch of ACC and Big 12 teams in there, and the SEC is going to beat up on each other because there's too many teams playing for too few spots. So they want special treatment because they're the Big Ten and the SEC. It's kind of understandable. And it sounds like this will probably happen in the next few weeks. I really think long-term they're going to go to a 16-team playoff, which would be down the road. But getting to 12 these next 2 years, then moving to 14 is probably where we're headed. I won't be a bit surprised by that. And the more you can get in, the more money for the conferences and for the college football playoff and all of that. So some of it's about money. Some of it's about, hey, we want to be in the playoff. And that's what one of the things they're talking about. Says that the SEC and Big Ten keep adding strong programs and weakening the other leagues, which is probably going to happen with Florida State. If they leave the ACC, they're going to join one of the 2 big leagues. So that weakens the ACC, strengthens the Big Ten SEC, but it also makes it tougher for those conferences to get more teams in, thus the 14-team or eventually the 16-team. So look for this to happen over the next few weeks. I can't imagine it being blocked. I don't know why it would be blocked, but that's probably where we're headed. All right, now we're going to talk about Pat McAfee over at ESPN. And I know some of you only want to talk about college football and you don't want to hear about Pat McAfee and the whole ESPN thing and all of that. And that's okay. Now's your opportunity to, well, Humongous, just tell him.
Just walk away.
Yep, now's your chance to walk away. That way you don't get in the comments, I don't want to hear about Pat McAfee. I understand. I just think it's very interesting because he's battling with ESPN and he's, a very independent person and he doesn't like the way they're trying to control him. And this is a guy that got big on YouTube. As you know, he used to be a former punter in the NFL and he got huge on YouTube. Now they're paying him like $18 million a year.
Woo! 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 Ow! Love that money.
and they put him on ESPN, and he doesn't want to play by the rules. You know, he wants to do the same stuff he's been doing on YouTube, and they're like, oh, no, we're ESPN. You've got to dot every I, cross every T, and you got to play the game the way we play it. And if you don't, we're going to go after you. And he's like, bring it on.
Oh, it's already been rotten.
Says Pat McAfee rails on ESPN exec again. He said, I don't got a MFing boss. And what he's talking about there, he's really had it out with this Norby Williamson. He said, I gave him a warning shot the other day. I guess that's when he called him a rat, because he was supposedly leaking out bad numbers about the show that weren't true. Talked about how he was attempting to sabotage his show. And while he didn't refer to Williamson, pretty much everybody knows that's what he was talking about. And then he says, I report directly to ESPN president and Disney CEO. He said in a nearly 6-minute clip, and then he said, Pat calls out his boss. He said, I don't got an MF boss. He said, what are we talking about? Went on with a list of issues. He's still mad at that guy for standing him up for a meeting 6 years ago. He said he waited 45 minutes in his office and the guy never showed, and that would have been that Norby guy. He says that guy was not a fan of me or our operation for a long time. Said McAfee explained that some others at ESPN did not roll out the welcome wagon for him when he first arrived and replaced the noon broadcast of SportsCenter, describing the experience that they were at war. So Pat McAfee is really their big draw right now, and he's their highest paid personality on ESPN. He does 2 hours over there, then he does another hour on YouTube. So he kept his link to YouTube. He didn't want to give that up in case he, got fired and they paid him off, and then, he's lost his path. So he kind of kept that safety net there. And ESPN, they can't stand him. He shows up with his sleeveless shirts and says whatever he wants, does whatever he wants. And a lot of people like that. A lot of folks went to YouTube because that's what they want. They don't want the little guy with the tie and the perfect little jacket saying all the perfect little things. They want somebody that's real, that acts like they do and talks like they do. McAfee does that. Now, he will rub you the wrong way if you don't like that type of personality. He's very brash and he doesn't really give a damn. But there is a market for that, a very big market, and ESPN is tired of losing. As you know, they're struggling big time financially, so they reached out to try to get somebody that could get more eyeballs on their cable shows. And obviously McAfee can do that. So this is going to get really interesting. I don't think this war's over.
It's over. Nothing is over. Nothing. You just don't turn it off.
I don't know if McAfee will last there long term or if the old guard's going to finally kind of get washed out. It's really hard to say. When you've got a big corporation like that that's losing money, a million things can happen because at some point they got to start making money and they got to have good ratings. If they don't, a lot of things are going to happen. So McAfee obviously is in a very strong position. He's got a very good contract. Even if they were to fire him, they'd owe him a fortune. So he probably doesn't care. At some point, he's just obviously doesn't care. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to be who I am, do what I want. And if it makes him mad, so be it. And I find this very interesting as somebody that does YouTube. Granted, I will never see $18 million. I'd be lucky if I made $1,800. But anyway, I just find it interesting. And I like the fact that he doesn't care. Just look, it's the way it is. You're going to screw with me, I'm going to screw with you.
Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
And I feel like some of the personalities at ESPN are kind of rooting for him privately. So anyway, I did want to cover this. I thought it was kind of interesting. And it's big news right now. This 14-team playoff, I think it's 80-90% chance it gets passed in the next few weeks. And the whole Pat McAfee thing, I don't think this thing's anywhere close to over. I think it's going to get worse way before it gets better. Dalton, tell him.
It'll get worse before it gets better.
Yeah. Dalton always knows. You can trust him.
Roadhouse.
He also knows better than to put baby in a corner. Anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's continue to cover, obviously, the college football scene, my Vols, the SEC, and any other big story that pops up out there. And if you've not subscribed, it's on your right, my left. You hit this little button right here. It costs you nothing. Helps me out. And right over here is most recent video YouTube. Thanks you'll enjoy based on your viewing history. We'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.